Philip K. Dick's Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said, which was one of his novels that was published in 1974, centers around Jason Tavern, who is luckily, at least at the beginning, on the very high end of this dystopian society. He is a celebrity, he is a singer with a TV show, but he lives in a police state that is controlled by the National Guard and is ruled by this elite class of people called the Sixes, who have been genetically enhanced to have all of these special merits, all of these abilities, including abilities like his. And however, though, there is a strange counterculture that works against the state, that lives underground, that brings into question whether it's actually legitimate or not because of all of its seedy practices, and you wonder whether or not it was actually created by the National Guard. And one example is the fact that the age of consent has been lowered to 12 in this world, and there's also a rampant drug culture. So everything that you could imagine that could keep a society small and ineffectual and stationary and not really being able to attain any kind of goals or make any kind of changes pretty much exists there. And that is really a perfect example of a lot of the real things that you see going on nowadays. And it's another thing I think that for me, when I was reading it, it's an example of how Philip K. Dick can make a story seem like a cross between like a sarcastic rant, like almost like a parable or an allegory that somebody would come up with as a joke, as a kind of an angry mockery, but also something that is very prophetic and very true, and but written in this very simple, almost comic book like way, to really poke holes, to really make fun of things. And Jason Tavern's success is eventually falls short when a former lover of his girlfriend, a really jealous man, throws this strange critter at him. This creature who you don't even know what it is, but it has this toxicity inside of it. It's described as looking almost like something that you would use to clean yourself with in the shower. It has these little plugs on it, really weird. And so he wakes up in the hospital one day and he finds out that his ID is gone. He doesn't exist, basically. He has no legal status here. And the rest of the journey, and I won't give too much of it away, but basically he's trying to figure out why he doesn't have an identity here anymore. And he gets sucked into the drug culture that exists, I guess, among the elites as well. And you find out he's being tracked, like you would imagine, tracked, and he's seen as a threat because people think, they suspect that he is indeed one of the Sixes, which is even more confusing because the rift in this world and who's on whose side and what the real purpose is becomes even more muddy now that an elite is being frowned upon by the police state. And I think one of my favorite things really about this novel is the way that it's able to get into how sexuality and also psychology and biology they get affected by politics, and I remember this quote really stood out to me, which is to live is to be haunted. And that's exactly like what it is. It's just it's like going through the looking glass. And I remember just laughing at many parts of it because it's almost like the two sides, the underground world and then the world above, are, as I described, symbiotically working together to eventually collapse in on each other. Like, it's almost like everything was set up for its own destruction, which makes you start to wonder, well, who was above the National Guard? Who made the National Guard? Which, of course, he doesn't explain, and he doesn't give it away. But like Lord of the Flies, which is another one of my favorite novels, it's like this dysfunctional society with some anarchic elements that eventually does itself in. However, the difference, though, is that at the end of the story, at the end of Philip K. Dick's novel, um, it doesn't really happen so much through kids being killed in this kind of tribal anarchy in an island. It happens through the people who were once part of the counterculture eventually turning themselves in to these forced labor camps. So that even though that negates the necessity of there being any kind of state control or any state power, it does, of course, um, perpetuate a non functional world. But people are willing to put blinders on and not have to really deal with that reality anymore. Um, and that's another thing that I think he really hit the nail on the head with, which is something that's very relatable and that I see many examples of all the time. Um, and he's, I would say this is probably his best one. Um, I take back what I said about some of the other ones. I mean, this is actually his best one, because of his understanding, his uncanny ability to show how the state in itself can also be a puppet.